I'm Matthew, welcome back to the channel, and we're back with the Rings of Power, a fantastic show that teaches us valuable lessons, like showing love for your family. So much so that I can't wait for season 3 when Elrond tells Galadriel about that one time he made out with her mum. I'm not gonna lie, before the season premiered, I predicted that this was gonna be the better episode in an already trash show. Much like episode 5 of The Acolyte, that despite having shit fight choreography, had fights. There was something to appeal to the male audience. Unlike the rest of the show that revolved around walking, talking and figure out who wanted to fuck who at any given time. But in true Rings of Power fashion, they managed to find a way to prove me wrong. At the time of making this script, I have no idea how long this video is going to be, because I wrote almost a full page worth of notes that I only started writing halfway through the episode when shit started getting really bad. So fluff up those couch pillows, grab yourself a cup of coffee or a beer depending on what time zone you are, and tell your date to stop touching your crotch for a minute, because we're about to review the worst ever fantasy battle in all of Lord of the Rings. But before we get to that, episode 7 begins with a peaceful morning in Eregion with Cal working his magic making the Rings of Men. Completely outside the timeline where these were made regarding the books, but that ship has long left Numenor and the sea is always female, or some shit like that. He starts noticing something fishy going on when Sauron steps in and asks him how long till the rings are finished. And again, much like the previous episodes, the interactions between these two have become quite decent to watch. But as Annie steps outside, we see the real situation of Eregion and the destruction Adar has laid with his trebuchets. Sauron takes control of the city's defenses when the next step of the siege takes place. And oh boy, is this a good one. We cut to the orcs turning the siege engines to the side, aiming them at the mountains.
They're damming the river.
Damn, that's a crazy plan. So let me get this straight, and I'm gonna try to explain this how I imagine the idea went over in the writer's room. Orc, fire, more rock, at big rocks, and big rocks fall like domino, and the story can happen. Practical? No, CGI. Suspension of disbelief is the avoidance of critical thinking in order to understand something that seems unreal or impossible. And it's a key element if you ever want to begin being entertained by this show. But let's pretend this is actually a thing a self-respected writer would include in their story. I want you to remember the orc's ability to hit that specific boulder that precipitated the rest of the mountainside to fall for one of the later parts of Adar's plan. By the way, that's a nice view of the city. I am glad the CGI department remembered to add that wall from season 1 to allow this whole season to happen. It would have been a very easy raid otherwise. But relax guys, it's not a mistake, alright? They only had $1 billion to work with after all. Back in Khazad-dûm, Durin Sr. urges Narvi to take back the mines from Durin Jr., but he rejects his orders after finally seeing the greed of the former. Narvi then informs Durin that Elrond is here to see him. Wait a minute, last time we saw Elrond, he went from the edge of Eregion back to Lindon, which is 750 kilometers away, to tell Gil-galad to send in the army. Now he's back to Khazad-dûm, which is close to Eregion, so let's just say another 700 kilometers to ask Durin for help. What's the time lapse in all this? Does everything that happens off camera just goes on pause while the characters cover massive distances on foot? Because we don't see him riding a horse until later in the episode. Anyways, he asks for the dwarves' help in the fight against Adar. Speaking of him, the orcs begin their march against the city, and I want you to remember how dry looking that riverbed looks. Trust me, it'll pay off. And a quick comparison I want to make here is how unorganized the guard elves of Eregion look. If I have to describe the battle tactics or battle formations of the elves that I've seen in previous Tolkien adaptations, the word that comes to mind is anal.
What did he just say?
No, not that kind. I mean as extremely or overly neat. Think the War of the Last Alliance or the Battle of Helm's Deep. Now compare that with this. Doesn't it look like a completely different style of fighting? Sure, you can say that the elves of Eregion have no command considering that Grandma Brimbor is not exactly helping, but they still have their captain shouting orders. But this disorganized and not at all anal garrison will somehow be able to fend off multiple thousands of orcs, and you can kinda see how, given that the orcs randomly fall dead when an arrow hits them in the shoulder. This is gonna be a long video. Adding insult to injury, and this is without a doubt a nitpick, cause I am a fan of armament. One of my favorite animes growing up was Saint Seiya. So you can imagine my disappointment where I see the guard elves of the city of the elven smiths having loose armor that also doesn't particularly protect them that much, cause sure, it's all good when you're shooting arrows from afar, but look at that entire back section of the shoulders, wide open to strikes. Also, random patches of gold on a green armor doesn't make the armor look better. This is the city of the elven smiths. You would think that some ornamentation would be considered, right? But no. They only have $1 billion to work with after all, so I guess I'll have to lower my standards. The orcs also have archers. That's another thing you'll be wise to remember. Another thing they have is a battering ram that they are transporting through the very firm looking riverbed with some difficulty given its weight, but nothing more outside of that. We then cut to Celebrimbor, who has started realizing he's inside a loop and confronts Sauron about it. He then manages to break the illusion facing the true state of his city, and surprisingly for me, I've grown to the performance of Charles Edwards, and seeing him realize who Sauron truly is was very well done. Obviously, skipping the fact that this would have been easily avoided if Galadriel would have told him who he was in the last season. But Cal walks out of his tower and immediately gets hit by a flaming boulder, and then walks it off. He goes up to the battlements looking for Mirdania, and we get a look at the multitudes of orcs crossing through the riverbed. Based on numbers alone, and considering that some orcs are already climbing the wall, there is no way that this siege is not already over, right? But oh boy, we still have a long way to go. Cal tells Mirdania the truth about Anatar, however it's too late as she doesn't believe him. As they look down, we see the orcs trying to break through, and Celebrimbor mentions that this is the thinnest part of the wall. This reminded me of a movie called Kingdom of Heaven, where something similar happens when the Saracens invaded Jerusalem. The thinnest part of the wall in that case was a former door that the Muslim army broke into by directing all their trebuchets to it. Now, if the orcs can aim their trebuchets at particular targets like the thinnest part of a faraway mountain, why not break the thinnest part of the wall the same way? Also, how do they know that's the thinnest part of the wall, where the only hint they could have of that was a small drain, which was underwater? I'm gonna die editing this. Sauron shows up and makes the elf turn against Celebrimbor, ripping the fruits of his previous influence.
Come, my lord. Let's get you back where you belong.
Get your hands off me! No!
Oh, that's a shame. I was starting to like her. But in the distance we hear a horn and we see Elrond galloping in with the elven army. On the opposite end, the orcs form a line with Adar at the center. Finally, something Lord of the Ring-esque. Now all we need is a heroic inspiring speech and the elves can gallop through and save the day. Oh look, the specialist is here, and also Gil-galad. He's the king. Never mind. Come on Elrond, let us hear it. Wait, that's it? That's kinda lame. Well, at least we're gonna get an epic clash between the elven cavalry and the orcs, right? Right? Oh, for fuck's sake. Elrond and Adar have a sit down, with Gal tied up in the back. Wow. That's so much fun.
You should have just kept charging Elrond.
I'm gonna have to agree with the girl boss here.
If she speaks again, cut out her tongue.
And with Adar. After a little dick measuring contest, Elrond refuses to give the ring in exchange for Galadriel. He walks past Adar, grabs the pin from his cloak, and as he faces him again, he challenges him to meet him in the field. But before leaving, he asks to bid Galadriel farewell, and the orcs let him, because it's in the script. Elrond then kisses his future mother-in-law.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
And this scene is weird, dude. There's like so much wrong with it. And the main argument defending it was that he did that to give Galadriel the lockpick, that this wasn't a romantic kiss, despite Elrond touching and kissing her like he wants his family tree to become a family racetrack. Kiss her hand her forehead. The orcs don't seem to care, and no one notices the exchange despite having 6 pairs of eyes looking directly at them, including Adar. The writers and showrunners who so boldly proclaim that this show respects Tolkien's legacy knew full well how this scene would look like when they decided to put it in the episode.
And he's potentially saying goodbye to her forever.
And yes, he is kissing his future mother-in-law, which, you know...
Well, but he doesn't know that yet.
You guys are idiots!
But hey, kiss the in-laws in the mouth next time you visit them. But they leave the camp and Elrond orders the other specialists to let Durin know where and when to attack. And the weirdest decision I think of all this episode is to have Elrond get back to fighting the orcs on their side of the conflict. He didn't try to get back to his troops, assuming they would have let him, and then back to the city. So now we see Elrond on his horse, surrounded by orcs who let him kick their collective asses, quite literally. Some of his troops are randomly there, dying, as he tries to cross through the middle of the orcs. And this is the problem with the plan the elves had, which was literally the March of the Rohirrim, like fucking come on. And the dwarves coming over the hill at first light? I wonder where they got that idea from. But they stopping the charge, which would have worked by the way, now has them surrounded by orcs without the ability to regroup with the other elves. And remember that dried riverbed the orcs so expertly maneuver with a battering ram? Well, the elves seem to be struggling with it. But to the weirdest fight sequence I have ever seen, because after being knocked off his horse, Elrond gets up to fight the orcs. His horse, however, doesn't immediately try to stand up, so this orc slices his throat. Have you ever seen a horse trip? They are not particularly fond of staying in the ground. So now Elrond and the orc have a 1v1, while the rest of the orcs in their proximity don't interfere. They know who he is, but they are nice enough not to gang up on him while he guts one of their own. And to finish him off, Elrond doesn't have a better idea than to shoot the trebuchet while he's on it. Pardon my basic physics, but from where he's standing, that would have just flipped him on his face. But more importantly, that is aiming at the city. One of those rocks could easily land on a baby elf, or worse, weaken the wall. But for the shock value, he shoots it to kill a single orc. He then takes a moment to mourn his horse while in the enemy camp, surrounded by orcs, doesn't mercy kill him, and gets back to the field. A lot of very peculiar directing decisions were made here. In the wall, the fight's over, right? I mean, look at this. The orcs have taken over the battlements, ladders are placed, and thousands of orcs are pouring in non-stop. What the fuck is this guy doing? Meanwhile, the orcs keep trying to break through the wall with what I'm gonna call a reverse battering ram that looks super impractical to be honest, but I love how after breaking some of that wall, they just grab the rocks, which are clearly foam, and move them aside. Guys, you have $1 billion. Hire some actors and tell them, pretend the rocks are heavy, try to sell the illusion. Well into the night, the siege continues. How? Half of the people of the city are dead or hiding. You've overwhelmed the defenses. You're still fucking around with that wall. I mean, have you tried the gate? And remember Damron? Where the fuck is he? We'll get to him soon, but why is this overwhelming victory taking so long? I would have let the AI take this one, I'm so confident.
We may not breach it before morning. The elf is faring better than you expected.
How? You're gonna hear me ask that a lot. Where, in all of what we just saw, was there any indication that the elves were winning?
Many Uruk are dying. Shall we sound the retreat?
No. Bring down that wall. At any cost.
Adar! Nom Kupakai.
Oh, for fuck's sake, look, you're an orc, a race whose sole purpose is war. This should be the best weekend of your life, mate. You and the boys away from the missus and the baby just sacking a city. Stop with the sentimentalities. Fucking soy boy orcs. Adar finds out that Gal escaped and doesn't immediately sound the alarm. Instead, he goes to where the bodies of the orcs are being cremated and sheds a tear for his fallen sons. How lovely. Another man crying in my fantasy epic. Just everything I love from it, honestly. Yeah. Feelings. I have an idea. Load those bodies into the trebuchets and fling them over the city. Let the rottenness kill the elves. Gal, in the meantime, is seeing all of this in the middle of the orc camp. And you remember how that one orc could smell the blood of a wounded elf from far away in episode 4? So why can't they smell Gal when she's right next to them? Does she really smell that bad? As she moves to a more isolated area, that's when the orcs notice her. They don't sound the alarm, however, and Elrond the Ex Machina saves her from them. You just gotta love when everything works out your way, huh? We're back to Casa Doom, where Durin, now in full plate of armor, is ready to leave for Eregion, and I'll say, this one at least looks decent. That's when Narvi shows up all bloodied up, saying that his father has attacked his men and is sticking his way to the Balrog, which is goddamn stupid, and a goddamn plot hurdle to artificially create tension, cause now Durin has to either abandon Elrond or abandon Casa Doom. How big is the army? Grab one platoon and send in the rest. Why does the entire army have to stay if the Balrog is still contained? It's dumb, and it's even dumber when you know what happens afterwards in the season finale. Annie and Cal have another great scene together, and I'll admit that these two have gotten progressively better in the past couple episodes, given that they have more material to work with. That material, however, is nowhere near plot accurate or logical, because as Cal defies Sauron to the end, he orders him to finish the rings before walking off. But he did finish the rings, because as soon as he goes, Cal tries to destroy them. However, he can't, so he stashed them in a bag. Now, had Sauron waited 2 more minutes, he would have had the Rings of Men in his possession. So the good that comes from the actors scraping by to get what they can from this script is very quickly taken away by stupid plot errors like this one. After failing to undo the rings, Cal tries to free himself from his shackles, but doesn't seem to be able to do it. If only there were tools around, or I don't know, a smith that could help him. Oh well, let's just say they are magical shackles. He tries to take his hand off, and to allow that to happen, he cuts off his thumb, which in hindsight is a much better outcome from what he gets in the books. He loses a lot more there, but is it just me, or just grab a hammer and break it? It doesn't even have to be that much, just dislocate the joint. Alas, he manages to leave the tower again, and one more time, he gets knocked down by a projectile. This fucking show, man. The guards, who are comfortable enough to leave their post, find him and try to get him back to the tower when Gal appears and helps him out. Gal then lets her know Sauron's plans, as well as confessing his regret for crafting the rings. He urges her to escape the city with the survivors and take the 9 Rings of Men while he buys some time. And one last time, Charles Edward gets 1 thumbs up from me, cause he actually delivers a very thoughtful performance in this scene. Elrond and the specialists devise a plan to take down the awful reverse battering ram that, despite operating uninterrupted for a full day, has yet to break through the wall.
How many torch arrows do you have left?
Enough to do my part.
Any arrow is a flaming arrow, as long as there's fire close by. You dickhead. So they start clearing a path towards the ram. They stop kinda far, but as Elrond orders her to shoot, disaster happens.
He's already dead.
I'm glad the multiple orcs with bows happened to spot and collectively decided to shoot at her at the same time. But because she's a woman, despite getting hit 6 times, all in non-fatal places by the way, she stands up, lights up an arrow and aims at the ram. As the music swells, epicness is afoot, and my question is, what the fuck is this guy doing? Why does he just ignore the elf that's next to him? Why did the 6 archers that shot her didn't reload and shoot her again after seeing her standing up? How can she have that much time to light the arrow, stand, aim, even look at Elrond before firing with no one stopping her? Anyway, she lands the arrow perfectly in what looks to be a bucket of pitch that explodes like a fucking bomb. Why was that in the battering ram to begin with? Does it require lubrication? After the explosion, Elrond and his men attack, and that's when the orcs remember her and shoot the 7th arrow that finally kills her. Yeah, a little bit late there, Buster. We could have used that arrow about 4 minutes ago. Anyways, seeing this commotion, Adar decides to finally send the big gun. Damrod, Eater of Dragons, Slayer of Stone Giants, at least according to the wiki. A character with its own soundtrack, and without a doubt the strongest unit in Adar's army, and he sends him last.
Send him in.
Lord Father, he will kill our own kind.
Send him in.
Why are they so worried he will kill some orcs? There's literally thousands of you. How are you keeping him quiet in the back in the first place? But he begins making his way to the wall, killing everything in his path until he sees Elrond, who is trying to destroy the battering ram. The one that they just blew up a second ago. What? That's the same battering ram, right? Am I losing my fucking mind? Who am I kidding? I'm definitely losing my mind. I'm reviewing Rings of Power. Fuck this show. So he knocks him out, but just as Elrond cuts the rope that released the mechanism, wounding him. And he just picks up the ram and starts bashing it against the wall and actually breaking it. That's great. Why didn't they try that against the gates?
Don't ask questions.
But Gil Ex Machina appears and attacks Damrod's on his ankles. Arondir also jumps from the tower into Damrod's chest, knocking him over and pinning his hand to the ground. Elrond then walks over and stabs his side as well as Gil-galad. Damrod laughs maniacally before dying. That's it. I don't want to be the one that poops on your parade, but that was fucking underwhelming. Motherfucker eats dragons and gets knocked over by a 70-kilo elf. Like here, his hand is up. He could have squished him like a bug. Instead, he goes to take the arrow from his hand while pinned to the ground by the size equivalent of a butter knife. The fuck are you laughing at, you dumb troll?
You should not be here! The king's place is wherever the need is greatest.
Where were you this whole time though? After the charge, he literally disappeared. But we hear Adar's horn again, and we see him finally marching towards the field with thousands of orcs still at his side. How would they ever consider themselves in a losing position? At the same time, the sun rises and Elrond gets all happy because he knows Durin will appear. Reinforcements are coming. But they don't. Only Ginger Specialist shows up, covered in arrows, dying, and tells Elrond about Durin's decision. No one is coming. They are alone. Gil-galad calls up the couple dozen elves remaining to form ranks. The second time this has happened in the entirety of the episode. While the horde of orcs marches towards them. This is the moment where you sound a retreat. Because no matter how strong you think you are, basic math is against you. And your commander is having a crisis. No, don't attack, run! What the fuck are you doing, you suicidal lunatic?
Durin will come. Durin will come.
Durin will not come. The elves predictably begin getting slaughtered by the orcs, and Arondir faces Adar, who catches an arrow mid-air and then stabs him with it. Arondir refuses to go down and he drives his sword through his chest. So long, Don Lemonless. As the orcs finally break through the wall and pour into the city, Adar gets to Elrond, picks him up with one hand and tosses him aside, grabbing the ring from his neck. And as the credits finally roll, one thought came to my head. You know the one thing that Lord of the Rings needs more of? Death metal. That's right, nothing screams fantasy epic like a guy ripping his own throat out. I am exhausted, and I wrote this into the script because by the time you see this I will have spent so much time making this video only for the algorithm to laugh at my face like Damrod as he was getting killed by the worst elves in history, the fucking idiot. So please, leave me a like. I've mentioned the movie Kingdom of Heaven somewhere in the video, and there's another great line from that movie that applies in this situation, and that's when Salahuddin defeats the newly appointed bloodthirsty king of Jerusalem and says to him, "Were you not close enough to a great king to learn by his example?" And this is the same thing these showrunners have done here. Didn't they learn anything from the multiple battles done in the IP? All of them epic and memorable even 20 years after they were done. And yeah, I'll even throw in some of the Hobbit ones in there as well. This was shit. You had Peter Jackson willing to help you out and you send him away. Actual Tolkien scholars and not some yes men, and you send them away. And the results were visible. This was without a doubt one of the worst ever fantasy battles I have seen in my entire life, coming from a show with an almost unlimited budget. And it stretches to the season finale, which makes it even worse. But enough of me ranting. If you watched this point of the video, you are a legend. Thank you so much, stay sexy, stay safe. Season finale video coming out soon, and as always I've been Nacho, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.